In a story, the staff at a luxury jewelry store ignored and disrespected an elderly lady because of her simple appearance. Later, when she returned with her famous son, the staff were shocked and ashamed, apologized. The story teaches that respect should never be based on money, clothes, or fame. Every person deserves it equally. The afternoon that started it all. You know those days when you just want to do something small and beautiful for the people you love. That's all Patricia wanted that afternoon, when she pushed open the glass door of the brightest jewelry store on Rodeo Drive. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over rows of diamonds and gold. The air smelled of polished marble and expensive perfume. Patricia paused just inside, smoothing the front of her simple cream jacket. It was clean but not new, the cuffs a little worn from years of careful washing. Her shoes were flat and practical, her handbag soft from long use, the kind you keep because it carries memories more than money. She smiled anyway. This was a special day. Her son had finally taken a break from work, and tonight they would have dinner together for the first time in weeks. She wanted to surprise him with a ring, something elegant but not loud, something that said, "Thank you for all the years you carried the weight with me, even when you were just a kid." She had saved for months, putting a little aside from every check. Standing in that shining store, she felt nervous but also proud. She could finally afford something beautiful. At the far side of the showroom, a young saleswoman in a navy suit glanced up. Her name tag read Emma. For half a second their eyes met. Patricia's smile widened, ready with a soft, "Hello?" But Emma's gaze slid right past her like she was a shadow and locked onto a couple in designer clothes walking in behind Patricia. Her posture straightened, voice suddenly sweet. "Welcome to Luca & Co. Can I offer you a glass of champagne?" she called out, over Patricia's shoulder as if the older woman did not exist. Patricia stepped aside, thinking maybe they just hadn't seen her. Stores like this were busy, she told herself. People made mistakes. She moved slowly down the first glass case, peering in at the rings. Light bounced off every surface, white and sharp. Each piece looked like a frozen star. Her heart beat faster. Somewhere in this glittering sea was the ring that would tell her son, "I see you. I'm proud of the man you became." A man in a slim gray suit, the manager by the look of him, noticed her then. His eyes traced her jacket, her bag, her shoes, one quick, cold scan. His smile was tight and professional. "Ma'am," he said, walking over, "our pieces here are very high-end. If you're just browsing, we also have a catalog online that might be more convenient." The words sounded polite, but the way he stressed "online" made something inside Patricia sag. She straightened her shoulders anyway. "I'd like to see a ring," she said softly, pointing at a simple band with a single diamond, classic and understated. "That one, please." He didn't move. Instead, he glanced at the security guard near the door, a large man with an earpiece who had already been watching Patricia a little too closely. The manager lowered his voice, but not enough. "Louis, can you stay close, please?" Then to Patricia, louder, "This collection starts at $20,000. Perhaps I could show you something more affordable." Patricia felt the tips of her ears burn. She thought of the tiny apartment where she'd raised her son alone, the nights she'd worked 2 jobs, the coins she had counted for rent and groceries. She had never felt ashamed of those years. They were part of her strength. But being looked at like this, like a child who had stepped somewhere she didn't belong, pulled her back to every humiliation she had swallowed to survive. She forced herself to keep her voice gentle. "Thank you, but I know what I'm looking for. I've been saving. I'd really like to see that one." The manager sighed just slightly, like she was asking too much. "Emma," he called, "can you assist this customer with our silver collection at the back?" Emma, who had been laughing with the wealthy couple, turned, annoyed at being interrupted. Her eyes landed on Patricia, and annoyance shifted into condescending patience. "Of course," she said, the words sugary but thin. "Ma'am, if you'll follow me, I can show you some of our entry-level pieces. They're very cute." Cute, the way she said it made Patricia feel about 2 inches tall. Still, she followed because that was what she had always done. Keep moving, keep trying, no matter how people judged. As she walked, she could feel the security guard subtly drifting along the edge of her path, pretending to rearrange displays while never quite taking his eyes off her. A few steps later, she heard the soft laugh of the rich couple behind her. "Did you see her bag?" The woman whispered, not quite quiet enough. "She's in the wrong neighborhood." Patricia's throat tightened. For a moment, the bright room blurred. She blinked fast, refusing to let tears fall here, not in front of these strangers who knew nothing about the miles she had walked to get to this day. Emma stopped in front of a small, lonely case near the back wall. Inside were thin rings and dull stones, nothing like the stars at the front. "These are very popular," Emma said, tapping on the glass. "They start at just 500, much easier to wear, you know, day to day." Patricia looked from the sad little display back toward the front case where the real diamonds still sparkled. She knew she could afford that first ring she'd chosen. It would stretch her, but she had the money. And yet it wasn't only about the ring anymore. It was about being told again that she was less important, less worthy, less seen. A quiet anger stirred under her ribs, not loud or reckless, just steady, like a flame that had been waiting for air. "Thank you," she said, her voice firmer now, "but I don't think this is what I'm looking for." Emma's smile vanished for a second, then came back stiff. "Well, like my manager mentioned, we do have an online store. You can always browse from home." There it was, the word again. Home, as if that was where people like her belonged, outside these glowing rooms far from crystal and gold. Patricia turned away, heading toward the exit. As she walked, the manager's voice floated after her, low but sharp. "Please make sure she doesn't touch anything on her way out, Lewis." That was the line that cut deepest. Not the prices, not the fake smiles, the assumption that she might steal. Her foot caught slightly on the edge of a rug near the door. She stumbled forward, catching herself on the glass of a display case. The security guard took a step toward her, hand half raised like he expected her to knock something over on purpose. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, not unkindly but not kindly either, just doing his job. Patricia nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I'm fine." But she was. In that small stumble, every tired muscle, every late-night shift, every moment of being underestimated rushed back at once. She remembered her son as a boy, watching her come home exhausted, pressing a glass of water into her hands and saying, "One day, Mom, people are going to treat you the way you deserve. I promise." Outside, the California sun hit her face, bright and hot. She stepped away from the door so the staff wouldn't see her wipe the corner of her eye. For a moment she thought about just going home, cooking something simple, pretending this whole trip had never happened. No ring, no store, no humiliation. But then her phone buzzed in her bag. A new message. "Hey Mom, you okay? Just finished a meeting. Call me if you need anything, yeah." She stared at the screen. Even now, after all his success, he still checked on her like the kid who used to peek around the curtain when she came home late. She could hear his voice in her head, warm and steady. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Mom, not after everything you survived." Her thumb hovered over the call button. She didn't want to bother him. He was busy. Important. The last thing she wanted was to sound like she was complaining about rude strangers in a fancy shop. But her heart was beating too fast, her chest tight with a mix of hurt and something else, something that felt like a quiet demand for dignity. She drew a slow breath, then another. The chandeliers inside the store sparkled through the glass behind her, cold and distant. Patricia pressed call. The ringtone hummed in her ear, each beep stretching the moment. On the third ring, his familiar voice came through, warm and alert. "Hey, Mom," he said, "everything okay?" She closed her eyes, her fingers trembling just a little around the phone. And in that fragile pause before she answered, the entire afternoon seemed to hang in the air, waiting to change. A son's promise. His mother's silence on the other end of the line lasted just a little too long. He knew her patterns. She filled quiet spaces with small talk when she was fine. This silence was heavy, the kind that carried swallowed tears. "I didn't want to bother you," Patricia finally said. "It's nothing really, I just chose the wrong store, that's all." Keanu leaned back against the wall of the studio parking lot, helmet in one hand, keys in the other. The late afternoon sun burned off the last of the city haze, but a chill slid through him. "Wrong store how?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "Did someone say something?" She tried to laugh it off, but it cracked in the middle. Slowly, in broken pieces, the story came out, the way the manager had looked her over. The online might be better for you. The guard following her like she was a thief. The stumble near the door and that final, cutting sentence. Make sure she doesn't touch anything on her way out. By the time she finished, his jaw was tight, fingers white around the helmet strap. "Which store?" he asked quietly. "Keanu, no," she rushed in. I wanted to buy you something nice for tonight. A ring to say thank you. It's silly. I shouldn't have." "It's not silly," he said, his voice firm now. "And you shouldn't have been treated like that. Tell me where you are." There was another pause. He could almost see her standing there on the sidewalk, shoulders pulled in, trying to make herself smaller to keep the peace. The same way she had when he was a kid and landlords raised their voices, or customers snapped at her in the restaurants where she worked double shifts. "I'm across the street," she admitted. "Little cafe on the corner, Luca & Co. is the store." "Stay there," he said, already moving. "Order something you actually like for once. I'm coming." "Keanu," she protested, soft but worried. "I don't want you to make a scene. You know how people are with cameras." He stopped beside his motorcycle, swinging his leg over the seat. "Mom, listen to me." His tone softened again. "I'm not going there as the actor they recognize. I'm going as your son. That's a much bigger job. Let me handle this kindly, but let me handle it." On the other end, he heard her exhale, the sound half surrender, half relief. "All right," she whispered. "I'll wait." The engine roared to life under him, vibrations running up through his arms. As he pulled out onto the street, city traffic rushed around him, taxis, buses, tourists with cameras. Usually he tried to ride unnoticed, helmet low, anonymous in the flow. Today there was no hiding from the heat in his chest. Wind tore at his jacket as he wove through lanes, the city blurring into streaks of light and color. A red light stopped him for a moment, and in that brief pause a memory flashed. Him at 13, cornered behind the school gym by two older boys. They'd called his mother names because she cleaned houses, because her accent bent certain words. He remembered her walking straight into that group of kids the next day, tiny but blazing, telling them that honest work was never something to laugh at, and that if they had a problem, they could say it to her face. She had been shaking when they walked home together afterward. He asked if she was scared. "Of course I was," she'd said, squeezing his hand. "Courage isn't when you're not scared, baby. It's when you show up anyway." The light turned green. Keanu twisted the throttle. 15 minutes later, he parked beside the cafe. Through the window, he saw her, sitting alone at a small table, hands wrapped around a cup she had barely touched. For a moment, he just watched her, this woman who had stitched his life together with second-hand clothes and first-class love. He took off his helmet and stepped inside. The bell over the door rang, a softer echo of the one from the jewelry store. Patricia looked up, and for the first time that afternoon, her whole face lit up. "You didn't have to come," she said, already standing. "I always have to come," he replied, pulling her into a hug. He felt how tightly she held him, as if the world could still take him away if she blinked. They sat. She tried to steer the conversation to his work, his schedule, anything but what had happened. He listened patiently, then leaned in. "Tell me exactly what they said," he asked, word for word. She hesitated, then repeated each line, staring down at the small sugar packets between them. By the time she reached the part about the guard being told to watch her hands, her voice was barely above a whisper. When she finally looked up, his eyes were dark, not with rage, but with something steadier, hurt deep and quiet, not for himself, but for her. "You know," he said slowly, "if a stranger talked to you like that on a movie set, they'd be fired before lunch." "This isn't a movie set," she answered. "This is life. People think they can treat anyone in old shoes however they want." He turned the coffee cup in his hands, thinking. Then maybe it's time life borrowed a page from the script. She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He pushed his chair back and stood. "Come on," he said softly. "We're going back." Her eyes widened. "Keanu." "We'll be calm," he assured her. "No shouting, no revenge, just truth. You deserve to be seen. If they're going to look at you differently when you walk in with me, they should understand exactly why that difference is wrong. For a long second, the only sound between them was the low murmur of the cafe. Then, slowly, Patricia rose to her feet. Her knees felt a little weak, but his hand under her elbow was steady. "All right," she said, more to herself than to him. "Let's go." They stepped out into the sun together, crossing the street side by side. Ahead of them, behind the glittering glass and chandeliers, the staff of Luca & Co. moved confidently between displays, laughing, fixing bracelets, pouring champagne. None of them noticed the pair approaching. Not yet. Just as Patricia reached for the door handle, Keanu touched her wrist, his voice low. "Before we go in," he asked, "do you still want that ring?" She looked at the store, then at him. The answer formed slowly in her chest, heavier than gold. She opened her mouth to speak, right as the door swung inward, and the soft chime of the bell carried them both into the bright, watching room. The moment the room froze, the light hit them first, sharp and white, bouncing off diamonds and mirrors. Patricia blinked, momentarily blinded, feeling that old instinct to step back, to disappear. But Keanu's hand remained steady at the small of her back, guiding her forward. Emma glanced up from the counter, already shaping her mouth into the practiced smile she used for customers she thought mattered. Her eyes landed on Patricia, and the smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flash of annoyance, then boredom. She started to turn away to call out to another shopper. Then she saw the man beside her. For a heartbeat, she didn't process it. She just saw dark hair falling around his shoulders, the easy way he carried himself, the quiet intensity behind his eyes. Her brain caught up half a second later. The color drained from her face. Her hand, halfway to the champagne bottle, paused mid-air. The manager across the room noticed Emma's sudden stillness and followed her gaze. When he recognized the man walking toward them, all the polish slipped off his expression at once. His jaw actually dropped. The security guard straightened unconsciously, smoothing his jacket, eyes darting from Keanu to Patricia and back again. For a brief, absurd moment, he wondered if this was some kind of hidden camera show. Keanu felt the shift in the room, the way air seemed to thicken with recognition. It was always like this, a wave of whispers building before the first person dared to speak his name. He never quite got used to it, and most days he would have pulled his cap lower, smiled politely, and escaped as quietly as he could. Not today. Today, that invisible spotlight could do something useful. "Good afternoon," he said, voice calm but carrying easily. "My mother was here a little while ago." Heads turned at the word mother. Phones appeared, subtle but not subtle enough. A teenage boy near the watches section mouthed, "No way," to his friend, already fumbling to hit record. Patricia wanted to shrink into the floor. She hated attention, hated the idea of being the reason eyes were on her son. Her hand twitched toward his sleeve. "Keanu, we don't have to." He glanced at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her stop. There was no anger burning out of control, no thirst for revenge. Just a quiet, determined protectiveness that had been there since he was old enough to understand that the world was not always kind to the woman who raised him. Emma recovered first, forcing out a breathless laugh. "Mr. Reeves, wow, it is such an honor. We didn't realize she was your customer," he supplied, still gentle. "You didn't realize she was your customer." The correction hung in the air, light but sharp. The manager hurried over, almost tripping on the edge of the rug. His smile was huge now, too bright. "Mr. Reeves, welcome to Luca & Co. We're thrilled to have you here. If we had known." "If you had known what?" Keanu asked, tilting his head slightly. The man swallowed. "Well, that she was." "My mother," Keanu finished. "Or just that she was connected to someone you recognize." The room went even quieter. The only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint clink of a bracelet someone set down a little too fast. Patricia felt every heartbeat like a drum in her throat. Part of her wanted to beg him to stop, to let it go, to leave this place and its cold light behind. Another part of her, one that had been stepped over and spoken down to for years, lifted its head. Keanu turned slightly, positioning himself so he faced the manager but left space beside him. Space that invited his mother in instead of hiding her behind his shadow. She came here to buy a ring, he continued. She saved up for it. She was excited. Instead, she was followed around and reminded that your store has levels. His gaze flicked to the lonely back case where the entry-level pieces sat, and that some people only belong at the bottom. The manager's practiced charm was evaporating fast. Sweat beaded at his temple. There must be some misunderstanding, he said quickly. We treat all our clients with the same respect. I'm sure my staff was just trying to... Louis, Keanu said, looking at the security guard. Did your boss ask you to keep an extra eye on her when she came in? Louis looked trapped, like a man standing in front of two doors, both locked. His loyalty to his job warred with the simple decency in his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. I was told to stay close, he admitted. I shouldn't have, ma'am, I'm sorry. Patricia was startled to be addressed directly. She blinked, then managed a small thank you, because she had never forgotten to be polite, even when people didn't deserve it. Keanu gave Louis a small nod, appreciating the honesty, then turned back to the manager. So there wasn't a misunderstanding, he said quietly. There was a decision. Emma shifted her weight from one foot to the other. We get a lot of people coming in to take photos, to touch things and leave, she blurted, grasping for excuses. We have to protect the merchandise, you understand. We didn't mean. You didn't mean to hurt her, Keanu finished, but you also didn't care enough to see her. That's the problem. A murmur ran through the store. The teenage boy had stopped recording, now just staring at Patricia with wide, guilty eyes. The wealthy couple from earlier stood near the front, uncomfortable, as if suddenly aware that the champagne in their hands was sour. Keanu turned to his mother. Mom, do you want to tell them how it felt? He asked softly. You don't have to, but you can. Her first instinct was to shake her head. Speaking up had never ended well for her in the past. It had cost her jobs, apartments, opportunities. But then she remembered that terrified little stumble at the door, the way the guard had watched her hands like they were weapons, the way the manager had assumed she couldn't possibly belong anywhere near something beautiful. She drew in a breath that seemed to start at her feet and travel all the way up. When I walked in, she said, voice small but clear, I felt proud. I worked hard for that money. I thought maybe just this once I would walk into a fancy place and not be made to feel like I had snuck in through the back door. She met the manager's eyes, surprising herself. When you looked at my shoes and told me to go home and shop online, you weren't just protecting your diamonds. You were telling me I wasn't good enough to even stand near them. Her words hung there, heavier than any stone in the room. Emma's gaze dropped. The manager opened his mouth, closed it again. Nothing clever came. Keanu watched their faces, then smiled. Not the charming smile from posters, but something smaller and more serious. Here's the thing, he said. My mother has spent her whole life making other people feel like they matter, at bus stops, in cheap diners, at jobs where nobody remembered her name. She did that when she had nothing. You're surrounded by millions of dollars and you still couldn't do the same. From the back of the store, a new voice cut through the silence, smooth and controlled. What exactly is going on here? Everyone turned. A woman in a tailored black dress and understated diamond earrings stepped out from behind a heavy velvet curtain. Her presence shifted the room again, the way gravity changes when a larger planet enters orbit. This, clearly, was the owner. Her eyes swept over the scene. Emma pale, the manager sweating, Louis frozen, Patricia standing straighter than when she'd first come in, and Keanu, calm but unyielding beside her. Mr. Reeves, the owner said, masking her surprise with professional politeness. I'm the director of this store. If there's a problem, I would very much like to hear it from you personally. Every gaze swung back to him. The staff held their breath. Keanu looked at his mother, then at the woman in black, and the choice of how far to take this moment settled squarely on his shoulders as the room waited for his next word.